to a webinar with Reuben Swartz. He's a longtime ally of M.E.G.A. And first, let me give you a brief introduction of myself and M.E.G.A. And then, of course, I will introduce Reuben for the real reason you came here today. So we have a lot of guests at this webinar, people who have not participated in a M.E.G.A. event before. So very quickly, let me introduce myself. I'm Liz Stebley, one of the 3 independent consultants who created M.E.G.A. about 5 years ago as a place where people can come and conquer their FUD, known as fear, uncertainty, and doubt. When it comes to being a solopreneur, running their own consulting business, coaching business, financial planning, things like that. M.E.G.A. is an educational organization in a community, and we're sort of not-for-profit. The only person who gets paid is our wizard behind the curtain, Marissa, and it's a labor of love on the part of the rest of us. So I've been in consulting since the last century, and anyway, it's not about me. I'm going to introduce Reuben, because this is who you really came to hear today. So Reuben is the founder of CRM, customer relationship management software called M.E.G.A. He calls it the anti-CRM for independent consultants who hate selling. He's also the host and chief nerd of the Sales for Nerds podcast. So if you're a podcast listener, I encourage you to check out Sales for Nerds. It's always an entertaining 20 to 30 minutes. Reuben spent over a decade doing sales and marketing for Fortune 500 companies, which was ironic because he struggled with sales and marketing for his own firm, relying on years of word of mouth and referral business. But now his mission is to spare people from the struggles he faced, trying to balance client work with business development, including the unnecessary years he wasted writing bad proposals and learning how to do things the hard way. He's trained hundreds of people to write proposals more effectively with less stress. And he's also authored a course called Sales Proposals the Right Way. He knows a ton about how to generate a solid pipeline of leads. And with that, I'm turning it over to you, Reuben.
All right, Liz, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. I think Liz and I share this sense of mission of we did a bunch of things the hard way, and we realized later that some things in life just have to be hard, but there's plenty of stuff that's just intrinsically hard about running your own consulting business. There's no need to take on extra degree of difficulty just for the sake of making things complicated and hard. So we are both in the business, if you will, of trying to help everybody else have an easier time of it than we did. So with that, I'm going to dive in, and let me make sure I can share my screen. All right, are we looking at Alanis Morissette cover here?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So as Liz alluded to, the deep irony that I was helping some of the most successful organizations on the planet get better at sales and marketing, and I was absolutely crappy at my own sales and marketing. And I think a lot of it is we absorb these myths about why sales and marketing is supposed to be a certain way, like we're supposed to be some kind of sales rock star or marketing genius or master networker. And of course, I was none of those things. So I would kind of go through the cycle of doom of, oh, you know, I know I need help with this. Here's a shiny new sales and marketing tactic, tool, strategy, whatever. Get really excited for a week or a month or a quarter. And then, oh man, it doesn't work. It's all word of mouth anyway. And then say, oh man, there's got to be a better way to pick up a new shiny object, and so on and so forth. And I don't know if you guys have been through this, but I have been through dozens of shiny objects and not really excited about it. And I would sort of think about like, well, I'm meeting lots of people, but no one wants to buy. I'm just no good at sales. And then occurred to me much later, like, what's the easiest sale you've ever had? Well, it's typically your favorite client calling you up and saying, hey, we want to do another project. And you're like, great. And it's all easy. It doesn't feel like sales. Or you get a perfect referral and doesn't feel like sales, right? Versus all those other ones that feel like, oh gosh, I'm slogging through things and this is really sapping my energy. So some of you guys may be way ahead of me on this, but it took me years to figure out, why don't I try to replicate the ones that seem really easy, as opposed to training myself to be really good at dealing with the hard sales, if you will. And part of the problem for me was I came up as part of the sales and marketing industrial complex, where I was in sales meetings with all these people who were like, you got to overcome the objections and blah, 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 and do all this stuff. Like, because these are professional salespeople selling the entire time. That was not me, but I was trying to act that way. And that caused a lot of problems. So first thing is, you already know what you need, right? You know, you're an expert in your domain, you know how to help people. It's not about impersonating the sales rock star or the marketing genius or whatever. It's about channeling your expertise and energy in a way that's going to lead to predictable results. So going back to the shiny objects, one of the most important things for us to understand is, assuming that everyone on this call is in a relationship business. If you're an e-tailer or something like that, that's a great business too, nothing against that. But if you're in a relationship business, you are in a conversation business. And for me, I was trying to get out of conversations because I'm an introvert. I don't like sales. It all felt awkward. I was like, let me use technology to get out of conversations. That's not what I said to myself. I said, I'm using technology to improve conversions, get more leads, blah, 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 be more efficient. But really what I was doing was trying to get out of conversations. So if you're in a conversation business, you want to have regular conversations with the right people. This is not all that rocket sciencey, but I'm amazed at how many people are in conversation businesses, because they're in relationship businesses, who are not having intentional conversations. So here's my super top secret solo consulting business development plan. And it's super sophisticated. So don't worry if you can't take all the notes right now. I'm going to share the slides later. You don't have to write everything down. Figure out who you want to talk to, your ideal client profile, and talk to them. If you do these things, good things will happen. Now, it doesn't mean that every single person is going to throw money at you, write about you in the Wall Street Journal, etc. But if you do these things in a relationship business, good things will happen. And if you're doing things that don't lead to either of these actions, ask yourself why. So figuring out who you want to talk to, that's about positioning, and it makes life a lot easier. So here's an example, and I'm just going to compare weak positioning with strong positioning. And we're going to assume, for the sake of argument, that you get the same number of referrals. Now, a lot of people get really nervous about having strong positioning because they think they're going to get fewer referrals as they get more focused. And the opposite actually happens. You actually get not only better referrals, but more referrals. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, you get the same number of referrals. Most people will take a referral call, but if you have weaker positioning, fewer people will. So you're going to have fewer initial conversations. Now, when you have weak positioning, a lot of those calls are going to go nowhere because they're not really the right fit for you. So you're going to do fewer proposals. And then, ironically, you're going to have more post-proposal conversations because people have more questions, more concerns, more objections. Your average price is going to be lower. And these are just representative numbers. You can plug in whatever numbers you want. And you're going to win fewer deals, right? Because they're not the right people. And then you're going to get less revenue. And then the other thing that I think is really important is you're going to have a lot less revenue per conversation. Oops. So this strong positioning means that we get our time in conversation is much more valuable because we're talking to the right people, right? It's like if you're a shoulder surgeon, I have a titanium screw here in my shoulder. You want to talk to people who have bum shoulders. You don't want to talk to everybody who walks into the hospital and say, don't you need some shoulder surgery? But a lot of us are doing things like that with our positioning. We're like, I work with small business owners on business problems, blah, blah, blah. And I'm not accusing anyone here of doing that. Just saying I've seen it happen. So the big mistake is we show up as Clark Kent instead of Superman, right? Clark Kent is the deliberate manifestation of the opposite of Superman, right? Like trying to be as bland and boring and sort of weak as possible. And I don't think we deliberately show up that way, but I know I did for years. I tried to look like this boring corporate entity when it was just me or when I had a small team, instead of just showing up as me and saying, hey, if you have this kind of problem, we're great to help you fix it. So, and of course, I thought I was doing all the right stuff, but I wasn't nearly specific enough. So here's how we can get super specific and make sure that the right people know us as Superman. Now, we can be Clark Kent some of the time, but when we're dealing with business development, we don't want to be freaking Clark Kent. So talk to the right people with the right words. I am one of those people who loves to make fun of cheesy marketing acronyms. And I have coined, I believe it is the cheesiest marketing acronym of all time, M.E.G.A positioning. So the reason that I have this cheesy acronym is just to help me remember what's going on. So M stands for magnetic. We want to attract the right people and repel the wrong people. And a lot of times we want to go out and attract everybody. That doesn't work. And even if we do, then we end up with a bunch of folks that we don't really want to be talking to because they're not the right fit for us. A magnet in marketing and in physics has two poles and they're of equal and opposite strength. So you can't just attract everybody. You have to, if you're going to attract the right people really powerfully, you got to send the other people down the hall to the place that they belong. And sometimes we feel nervous about, oh, but maybe I could help them. Maybe they need shoulder surgery. Maybe they will later, whatever, right? No, sending the wrong people where they belong is just as valuable as attracting the right people because it means we don't waste our time and our energy on the wrong folks. And if you think about this, one of the amazing things about the world today is everyone is a media company, everyone is a broadcaster, publisher, however you want to think about it. And if you're this red dot in the middle of all these people, there's this temptation to say, well, there's a bunch of people around me that I can sort of broadcast to. Let me see who I can convince to buy my stuff. Because a lot of them look like they have bad shoulders, kind of thing. Well, everyone is shouting. No one can hear anything. It's all getting lost in the noise. And if you're trying to reach other red dots, the rest of your tribe, it's really hard to reach them. Now, if we have some yellow dots here who might be our referral partners, they can act as our virtual sales team. Right? We don't think about that because we're independent people. We don't have a sales team, but we do. We just tend to not empower them very well to relay our message, to think of it at the right time and to be able to relay it. So if we can make our message really powerful and easy for these folks to repeat, well, now they can start broadcasting our message further. And if we dial up the strength of that magnet, we can start clearing out some of the folks who belong elsewhere and have our message amplified and repeated further. And then we can start bringing the right people towards us. Now, E is for easy, because what's going to happen here, people tend to think, yes, gosh, that all sounds great in theory, but I am a special snowflake business and I have to deal with these 6 different market segments or 3 different ideal clients. And, I couldn't possibly do anything to narrow that further. And I have been there, right? I have gone out and spent my days helping clients get narrower and more focused, but then come back to my office and think I'm a special snowflake. I couldn't possibly get more focused. And I think my theory is the reason this is hard is because our cerebral cortex knows the math and knows why we should get really focused. But there's a part of our lizard brain that does not like excluding anything. It's like we are wired for scarcity by evolution. And so we can't logic our way out of something that isn't really a logical objection. So the way I trick myself into doing this sort of the right way is to say, I'm not going to think of big versus small market, because even the small, super narrow market that I'm defining, typically it's got more people in it than I could serve in a lifetime, right? It's not like we're going to run out of people. And if we run out of people in 3 years, we can always broaden it. But instead of thinking big versus small, let's think about easy versus hard. Do I like sales and marketing to be easy, or do I like it to be hard? Going back to that notion of what's the easiest sale you've ever had, right? The ones that don't feel like sale. Do I like those? I love those. Do I want to win Salesperson of the Year award for overcoming 18 objections and badgering someone into compliance and then having a miserable project that I hate? No, I want easy. So whenever you have that little nugget of doubt, like, oh man, I don't know, I feel nervous about getting too laser focused. Think about, is sales and marketing too easy? Because if it's too easy and you're bored, go broader. If it's not easy enough, go narrower. And we're always allowed to take a client who doesn't meet our perfect profile. Like we can do that. But if we're going to be out there broadcasting our message and having our referral partners relay that message for us, let's have them relay the message that attracts the ideal client, right? Now, how do we do this? We want to define ourselves so that we are the 800-pound gorilla in our market. And this is one of those things that we get as a superpower as an independent consultant that we often don't take advantage of, right? We just show up as Clark Kent, but we don't have to say, I'm a business coach, right? That puts me in a sea of a million other business coaches, or I'm a web designer or something like that. All these things, nothing wrong with that category, but you're just in a sea of competition at that point. But if you can define your market so that for your ideal client, you are the logical choice, you are the equivalent of the Apple or Nike or Coca-Cola or whatever, then you've got it. Because the people who are in your market are going to say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I found you. Finally, someone who gets it, etc. Versus, I'm talking to 6 other people. How are you different? Who's got the lowest price? Blah, 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 blah. Now, of course, it's tempting to go through all this and sort of concoct this Superman that isn't actually us. So it's really important that we show up authentically. We have to be ourselves. And I tried to be that sales superstar. I tried to be the marketing genius, et cetera. I tried to be all these things that were not me because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And first of all, it is freaking exhausting to try to be somebody else. And 2, people understand that you're not being authentic. And when you're in a relationship business, a trust-based business, and you're not being authentic, even if you're just being that way because you're awkward and nervous, people are like, something shady is going on. I don't trust you. And that kills your sales, right? You have to show up as you. Naturally, probably the professional version of you, depending on how wild your Friday nights get. Maybe not the end of the Friday night version of you. Maybe it is. I don't know. But you have to show up as yourself. And I think it's important that when you show up, not just in person or on Zoom or on the phone, but online, on LinkedIn, on Alignable, on YouTube, on your website, that should be you, right? Like if you've got a solo consulting business, don't have an about us and talk a whole bunch of stuff about you in the third person, as if some PR flack wrote your bio. Be like, hi, I'm Liz. Here's what I do. Here's why it's important. Because you're not fooling anybody who's looking for a big firm, and you're getting rid of the advantage you have against those larger firms, which is, hey, there's a freaking human being here who gives a damn about you and your problems. So there's a natural temptation, especially these days, right? The new shiny object is AI. And it's easy to walk into ChatGPT and have it throw out some stuff that that's going to sound reasonable because it slurps up stuff from around the internet and it's going to regurgitate stuff that sounds like somebody else. And Sarah asked a great question. Is there a risk to stating that you are a solo enterprise? I use we in much of my company description. Here's what I would say. From someone who did this for years, nobody was fooled into thinking that I was a big company with big company capabilities. A lot of people were miffed because they would have a great conversation or get a great referral, and then they'd go to the website and it was all like corporatese. So I think, if there is a we in your company, talk about we. If there isn't, and Mark, can you mute yourself, please? Or whoever needs to be muted.
I muted them.
All right, thanks. Like, I think when you're in a trust-based business, as all of us are, anything that violates trust puts you back. And it can be a little scary to say, hey, it's just me. But I think anyone who works with you has to be comfortable that it's just you, right? Like you're not going to show up with your team of 10 consultants to do the work. So embrace that. But don't outsource this stuff to AI. Liz has heard me talk about this before, but I like to think about the bar test or the AI test. Like if you get introduced to your perfect client at the bar and they're like, oh, Reuben, so glad I found you. Liz says I need to talk to you. What do you do? And I say, I leverage synergies in your team to maximize ROI and boost productivity. What are they going to say? They're going to be like, what does that mean? Right? We want to talk as if we are at the bar several drinks in. I get all the business processes out of your head and spelled out for your team so you can go on vacation within 3 months. We start by booking the vacation, something like that. I don't know, whatever it might be. And then they can say, oh, that's really interesting. How do you do that? Right? We don't have to give them everything, but imagine you're having that human to human conversation versus the leveraging synergies and blah, 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 blah. And AI is great at creating these leveraging synergies things, but it's also actually really good at taking them out. So you can ask it to refine your positioning, right? Make it shorter and understandable to my grandmother, emphasize measurable results, etc. Right? Name your unique approach. So instead of saying, I'm a business consultant, say I am the, ladder to excellence leader or whatever the heck it might be, you're going to feel stuck at times. So give me 10 ideas for my offer name, right? Make them acronyms, etc. And then make sure your origin story is powerful, right? How we got to do what we do is really important. And it's probably more important than our credentials and our awards and our degrees and all that stuff. But a lot of us aren't doing a great job of telling that. And that's a great way to let people know about you authentically. And then something else I really love about AI is just the brainstorming of ideas, right? Sometimes the ideas are there and sometimes they just don't flow. And sometimes they're there and then you rush to the keyboard and you start to type and for some reason it all just shuts down. That's a great place for AI to do things, right? To just say, give me 10 2 to 4 word phrases that would describe this approach in a memorable way. Now, I don't like any of these, but if I'm stuck, gosh, it's a great way to get things moving again. So when I say AI, what I really mean is ChatGPT, right? It's $20 a month for version 4, or it's free for 3.5. You can add, if you guys are familiar or aren't familiar with this, there's an AI PRM Chrome plugin that gives you a lot of prompts that are around sales and marketing. And again, this is like having a freaking full-time intern for between $0 and $20 a month. So I am not anti-AI at all. I am just a fan of AI as an intern, as leverage versus a crutch. So the secret to getting referrals is good positioning and regular conversations, right? It's not really that big a secret, but having that strong positioning message that's easy for someone to call to mind, like, oh, I just ran into somebody. This makes me think of Liz. Great. And then having regular conversations to nurture those relationships and also hopefully to make some introductions the other way as well. So here's a way to think about this, right? Like I help ideal clients who have various attributes deal with a big client pain that results in some kind of cost of pain. Unlike the traditional approach that someone would take uh, if they don't hire me, which has some drawback, my unique approach lets you enjoy the benefit, blah, 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 blah. Right. And then instead of saying I am a consultant, I would say I am the somebody, right? I am the Batman. I am the Spider-Man. I am the blah, 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 blah. That's going to put you in that gorilla category of one. And then what's your origin story, right? How did you become this person? Why did you become this person? Right. And this is not necessarily the story of your triumph. It could involve triumph, but it's about like it's kind of like the radioactive spider bite of your story, not the and then I beat up 20 criminals part of the story. That can come later. And then using all this, we now have an empowered virtual sales team that can do a lot of work on our behalf. Right? I said before, if you're in a relationship business, you're in a conversation business. Now, the secret to getting web leads, because as much as we want our referral network to do a lot of work for us, we also want our website to do work for us. And these things are not either or. I think a lot of times we kind of get in that phase of, well, my website's just there to prove that I exist, and I don't really have, I don't get business from it, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think people are right to say no one buys consulting services online. right? That's not a click to add to cart type of deal, which is fine. But it's a great way to convert leads to visitors to leads to conversations. So if we have good positioning, we have a helpful website, and then we have the follow-up conversations, suddenly our website can actually be part of our business development. And this, it's like yin and yang with the referrals piece, right? Because somebody can say, if they make an introduction, the first thing someone's probably going to do is go check out the website. If someone is on our website and likes what they see, they may go to their LinkedIn and see who's mutually connected. So it's not one or the other. But then here's where follow-up is so important. So I know there's a bunch of numbers on this slide, but the basic idea is, let's say you need a certain number of conversations to get a client. If you follow up 100% of the time, it doesn't matter how many conversations you need, eventually you get them, right? But if you just go to 90% follow-up, by the time we get to 3, 4, 5 conversations, we've kind of lost half of our pipeline. 80%, obviously it's even worse, right? So you can see, I think I've got in red here, 25% and below. If we don't follow up effectively, things slip through our fingers. And unfortunately, as much as I'd love to tell you that I have seen this a bunch, but never had the experience of it myself, that would not be the case. And I'm someone who's an engineer. I'm pretty process oriented, pretty like, hey, let's make sure we have our ducks in a row. But there are certainly times when I've gone to just had too many balls in the air and I dropped them. And then 6 months later, 12 months later, 24 months later, I run into somebody, oh man, I forgot to follow up. And then it's too late. Now, this assumes, of course, that we win 100% of the deals. Let's say we win 75% of them. Now you can see the numbers are even more stark if we don't follow up religiously. So this means a couple things. One, obviously, we'd like to have fewer conversations required, which kind of ties into having the stronger positioning. And then two, we really want to be in this 100% follow-up category, or as close to that as possible, right? Somewhere between 90 and 100%. If we get into the even just 80%, if we need 2 conversations and we follow up 80% of the time at a 75% win rate, half of our opportunities disappear. So very important that every contact has a next conversation date. And you can do this manually in most CRMs. You can do it in your spreadsheet, but have a way of making the default so that you don't have to manually enter it. The default should be that you keep talking to people until you decide that the next conversation date should be never, right? Like, I've decided this person's disqualified. And Bill asks, any thoughts on when to cut bait on unproductive conversations? Part of it is getting really strong with your positioning, right? And that's going to mean that your conversations tend to be more productive, and or you just have someone come in and you say, hey, we're not the right fit for each other. That's super helpful. And then the other thing I'd say is push for no. Instead of pushing for yes, push for no. Say, I don't think you're the right fit. You don't seem like you're ready, whatever, right? Like, if you are out there begging for business, a lot of times people feel impolite to tell you no when they really just want to tell you no. But if you feel like you're in control of your business and you have this big stream of people in your waiting room, if you will, to speak to the doctor, right? Who's the doctor actually going to work on? You get to say things like, I don't think you're ready for this, or I think you'd be better served elsewhere, etc. Now, some people, I'm not going to say that you can do all of this flawlessly, and there will be some people who ghost you. Some people who seem really on board and then they're not, right? Like and maybe they were, and then their boss killed their budget or whatever, and they're too embarrassed to talk to you about it. I'm not going to say that never happens. And so at some point, depending on how your conversations went, you say, hey, Bob, haven't heard from you in a little while. Assume you're not interested. I'm taking you off my list. You know where to find me if that ever changes. And I don't think there's an easy, hard and fast rule for exactly when that should happen. But let's just say this, that the more you feel like you have a healthy pipeline, the easier it is for you to push for no, the easier it is for you to tell people, hey, I guess you're not interested. Sorry to hear that. But think about that it often takes 5, 6, 8 conversations for somebody to build the trust, to collaborate, to figure out what the solution should be before you um, before you cut bait and say forget about it. Most of the time, the problem is we don't follow up enough or we don't follow up effectively. So let's put this into action, right? Figure out who we want to talk to, nail your positioning. That's, and 3 words that are pretty simple, but not necessarily easy. So if you're trying to fill out sort of that fill in the blank thing that I was showing a few slides back and you're having trouble, talk to your favorite clients and peers for feedback. Oftentimes they're going to use words. They're like, oh, aha, yeah, that's what I meant to say. And really their words are what's important because they're the ones who are buying. And your favorite clients, the ones that you wish you could clone, if you take their words, you're more likely to attract more people like them. Right? Ask ChatGPT to brainstorm as needed, not as a crutch, but as a lever, as a brainstorming partner, and then talk to these people. Block off time in your calendar every week to make these conversations happen. This is probably the number one thing. Like if you actually have time for it and you do it, good things are going to start happening. And you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I got this one referral, I have to go close them. Instead, it's just part of your practice, right? We are in a consulting practice, like a medical practice or a law practice or whatever. And part of the practice, the thing that was like the most terrifying for me was this. Like, I'm going to block off time on my calendar and talk to people. It's like being at the top of the slope and somehow you feel like you got off on the black diamond lift when you're supposed to be on the bunny slope and you're staring over the edge like, oh my gosh, I'm about to die. And then you go down the bunny slope and you're like, that was actually fine. Like I fell a couple of times, I picked myself up. It's all good. It wasn't nearly as scary as I made it out to be in my head. And as I build up the muscle memory for it, it no longer seems crazy to just pick up the phone and call people. Notice I'm not talking about any cold calling. I'm talking about people you already know, your referral partners, past clients, people who are express interest, right? So many people, um, so many people say, I just started my consulting business and I got some referrals and then the referrals dried up. What should I do? And like, well, who knows about your business? And people say, well, I updated my LinkedIn status and I sent out a newsletter to some people. Like, okay, but you have a bunch of allies, people who really care about you. Have conversations with them. I don't mean pitch your services. No one wants to be on the receiving end of that. But hey, I'm Reuben. I just started this consulting company. Would love to get your advice on blah, 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 blah. Who do you think I should talk to, etc. That's an easy conversation to have, and people like to be helpful, right? Set up meetings with your referrals. Make sure these referral conversations happen, right? Be a good recipient of referrals. You don't want to be the kind of person who gets referrals and then when that person asks, hey, did you ever meet with Reuben? Oh, no, I never heard back from him, right? Like be on top of those. And there's nothing like, because people are not giving you referrals for you, they're giving referrals so they look good to their network. Make them look good and they'll keep giving you more. Again, not rocket science. And then people who request lead magnets on your site, talk to them, right? Great to send a follow-up email, but you've got to actually have that conversation. And it's not a sales conversation, right? Say you have a lead magnet about, I don't know, Six Sigma or whatever the thing is that you're a specialist in. Someone requests it. You don't say, hey, you want my Six Sigma services? That's a miserable time for both parties. But if you say, oh, what's going on with your Six Sigma project? Have you started? What have you found? Blah, blah, blah. And it's 2 people kind of shooting the breeze about something that the other person wants help with, that you're an expert in, that you enjoy talking about, then good things happen. And then always take good notes. I don't know about you, but I used to think I could remember all this stuff. And especially these days with Zoom and just there's just too much going on too quickly. So take good notes. You can use a Fathom note taker for your Zoom calls or whatever, but make sure they're in there. Make sure you can reference these notes before you get on the next call with somebody. Just make your life easier. So again, if you're in a relationship business, you're in a conversation business, so talk to the people you already know. Some of those people might just say, great, and you send me a proposal, right? Some of them are prospects, they're not ready to buy now, but you keep talking to them. Some of them you need to nurture. Some of them you disqualify. Some of those people you already know are going to give you referrals. And then some folks are going to come in on your website and request a lead magnet, make sure you're talking to them. So this is like the high level view of my super secret two-step sales process. And the other thing that I think is really important, I literally had this mental model in my head because I spent years trying to do everything I could to avoid talking to people. So I would sort of default to not following up or sending an email, maybe leaving a voicemail. And instead, what we want to do is we want to default all of these things to conversations, right? Like if you are in sales, that's a conversation, not an email. And that doesn't mean you can't send a follow-up email, etc. But sales equals phone, marketing might equal other things. Now, if you do this, here's what happens, right? Opportunities times close rate times price divided by time equals dollars over time. This is, I get to go back to being nerdy here, but this is just math and you can't argue with the math. Now, if I get more opportunities because I am attracting the right folks, I am using my referral network to get great referrals, I'm actually going to close more of them because they're better fits than my more generic positioning. And I can probably get a better price point as well. And I can do this in less time because I'm not wasting a ton of time talking to the wrong people. Well, what happens, right? If I raise all the numerators and I decrease the denominator, well, then I get more money in less time. And the other thing that I really like about this is it's actually enjoyable. Like I still remember when I wasn't focused and I was trying to go close business, especially when I had to make payroll. That was really miserable. But I ended up with knots in my back, right? Here's a freaking sales and marketing consultant for some of the top companies in the world who tries to do his own sales and marketing and gives himself a headache. Like, how bad is that? Versus now, I spend most of my day talking to people and it's actually super fun and it's much more effective. So, reminder, here's the top secret plan, right? Figure out who you want to talk to, your ideal client profile, and talk to them. That's it. If you want to find more about me, Liz is going to share these slides later, so you don't have to write all this down, but I'm available in various places on the internet. You can always drop me an email at reuben@mimra.com. And if you want to do this in your existing system or your spreadsheet, or even with paper, you can do everything I said that way. If you want a dedicated anti-CRM, if you will, that's built specifically for this, that's what Mimra is for. And of course, don't take my word for it. You got awesome people like Rod Nyberg from M.E.G.A who have nice things to say about it. But you can learn more and sign up at mimra.com. And I think Liz has a secret discount code if you're actually a M.E.G.A member, just one more way that your membership is giving you value. And if you want help, I'm going to be doing a free M.E.G.A exclusive workshop next week for help on positioning, scheduling, and conversations, getting a draft of your lead magnet, getting organized with your conversations, and so on. And so if you want to do that, sign up for a member account, check your M.E.G.A portal for your discount code if you're a M.E.G.A member, or if you're a guest, sign up for M.E.G.A and then get your discount code, and then ping me to let me know that you came from this webinar, and I'll let you into that one as well. So that's what I have to broadcast to you. I know there are some questions in the chat that I haven't quite been able to keep up with. So no stress, have fun, let your positioning do all the hard work, and you get to actually enjoy conversations about the thing you care about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Liz, and then we can do Q&A or whatever Liz directs me to do.
Reuben, I wish that there was like a way that we could have like those little clapping hands, applause balloons floating to the top of the screen, because this was really, really fantastic.
Awesome.
You know, we're all about being authentic, and this is a way to build your pipeline and be yourself, right? That's what's important. There was a message in the chat that you went a little bit too fast. It was from Jesse Jacoby about which AI tool do you recommend? When you stop screen sharing, I lost the view of my chat window, but maybe you can scroll back.
Yeah, I see Jesse's question.
Yeah.
OpenAI's version blocks you out after using a certain number of prompts. How many is that? I have not hit that yet.
Hey, Reuben, it's Jesse. Love your energy. Thanks for the great content. I found that it's a certain number that if you exceed it, And then there are all sorts of like different versions or spin-offs of ChatGPT, some free, some for fee. So I was just curious if you're going straight to the source and you haven't hit the limit, or if there's some other tools that are sort of ancillary that you recommend.
I will tell you, I am a little overwhelmed with the quantity and velocity of what's going on with AI right now. I will also say that it's been a while since I've been this impressed with something. As a computer nerd, I've been waiting for the actual sort of chatbot thing for about 30 years, and now I feel it's actually here. So I basically use ChatGPT. I'm experimenting with that AI PRM plugin that I mentioned. I think it does some stuff, but really, like plain ChatGPT, I think is great. Like think about having an intern at your beck and call, except instead of, hey, get me 10 ideas for a lead magnet, and they come back tomorrow with 10 ideas, they come back in 10 seconds. And then you say, okay, great, expand on 3, 4, and 5, but emphasize the, transmogrifier or whatever. And then it comes back again in 10 seconds and just gives you that information. It's astounding. And that doesn't, then there are a bunch of things that plug into ChatGPT. There's Bard, there's other tools as well. And I don't know about you, but my inbox is filled with, Reuben, you really need this chatbot on your website and blah, 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 blah. And I have not been impressed with that yet. But and I also would not say that I'm an expert at this new AI thing, but I think plain old vanilla ChatGPT, perhaps with a premium if you want, maybe that's why I'm not running into the prompt limit, really worthwhile if you use it as a lever and not a crutch.
Jesse gave thumbs up. Somebody else had a virtual hand raised, but then they lowered it. And now I'm looking at everybody on the screen. I'm not seeing it.
Steve's got his hand up.
Okay, Steve.
Steve's got his hand up. I didn't have it earlier, so it may be somebody else. But sorry I'm late to this, but love what I'm able to gain so far for the last few minutes. But I was just going to throw out with ChatGPT. I just started my own HR consulting firm a couple of months ago, and I'm not going full bore with finding clients yet, but my wife is a realtor, and she and I both use ChatGPT and have gone ahead and spent the $20 a month, I think it is, for the subscription. It gets you to ChatGPT 4, and she's using it for a number of different things on a daily basis, finding it very helpful.
Yeah. I agree. I am spending the $20 a month, and I don't use it as much as I should, but it's great. And one of the things, if you guys spend time in those Zoom networking meetings where everyone puts their info in the chat, right? Then you have this giant text file with a bunch of info that's a pain in the neck. You can just drop that right into ChatGPT and say, give me a CSV file of everyone's contact info, and then slurp it up into your CRM and actually start reaching out and connecting with people instead of thinking, what am I going to do with this text file? Terry?
Hi, Reuben. Thank you so much. This is a great session. Wondering if you can spend a little bit of time on the people you may know or people you know, and just that initial outreach. What are you saying? Like I have a huge network, and it just seems awkward sometimes to kind of reach out and just say, I want to let you know what I'm doing. I don't know. Can you walk me through that? And then you had mentioned, want to get your advice on this or that. What is the this or that we're asking for advice on? Is it our positioning? Talk to me a little bit about those casual conversations.
Okay, great question. And I didn't really delve into too much detail here, so I'm glad you're bringing this up. I think that the number one rule is have the conversations with people you want to have conversations with, however that needs to happen, right? Not ethically, obviously, but so for some people it might be, oh my gosh, Terry, it has been years. I feel really awkward even making this call. And every time I go to pick the phone, I feel awkward, so I don't do it. And then it gets worse. And finally, I was like, I heard the song on the radio that we used to listen to, or that, was playing when we did that project together. And I was like, frick, I'm just going to call Terry right now. Right. If that's really what's happening. But I've literally had that kind of go on in my head. And then people are like, oh my gosh, that's so great. I'm so glad you called, whatever. Right. Or it may be, I heard from Liz that you are the person to talk to about strategy, Terry. And, I was wondering if you might just have 5 minutes for me to talk. It's going to depend person by person, but these are all people that you've spoken to in your life, right? Like they're not strangers. If somebody calls us, one of those people calls us and needs help, we generally want to help them, right? Assuming they're good people that we like. Other people want to do that for us as well. And I think, especially for us introverted folks, it's hard to understand. And I think a lot of us are kind of schooled by school to say everything is individual and getting help is cheating. No, freaking go get help. And it doesn't have to be like a template where I'm going to call 100 people this week and I'm going to read off the script and they're all going to get the same thing, because they're all people that I know that I have different relationships with. But even if you have a fallback, right, like you're stuck or you just can't say it, say, I was on a webinar with this guy and he's a nut, but he told me that I had to go call 100 people in my network this month. And he put it as a challenge. And so I feel awkward as shit, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's why I'm calling you. I would love to catch up.
Blame it on
Right?
Ruben. I
Like,
like that approach.
blame it on me. And that will work. That will work great. But that's the fallback, right? That's only if you can't think of something more like actually meaningful and personal to say, or it could be both, right? Like, hey, I've been thinking about calling you for a long time and blah, 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 blah. And I just felt awkward about just picking up the phone and calling you. And then I was on this webinar and this guy was like, dude, you got to call the people. And right.
But you keep it personal, right? Like,
Yeah.
like you don't even go into, you talk about what you're doing professionally, but kind of don't dive into that unless they ask.
Well, it depends on the call and the relationship, right? Like you might be
Yeah.
calling because Liz told me, Terry, that I need to talk to you because you're the wizard at positioning. I don't know if I'm the right fit for you as a client, but gosh, I'd love to, like, can you just tell me a couple things?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's okay to ask for, the thing is you're not pitching them your services. I think that's the thing that makes everything awkward. So don't pitch. The right people will say, gosh, that sounds really cool. I need to talk to my boss about getting some budget for you. Or more likely, they'll say, you need to talk to Liz. She's looking for this kind of thing. You
Yeah.
might be able to help her.
Thanks.
Jesse, raise your hand.
Jesse.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to elaborate on Terry's question and Reuben, your awesome response is one strategy I like to employ is called the give to get. So if I'm going to reach out, right, I like to provide something of value for that person. And this doesn't have to be elaborate or lengthy, but a quick, like I might research like the person's company. Have they had any like big press releases or cool things happening at the company? Is the stock price doing well? Have they, put out some press releases or whatever, right? Has the person commented on LinkedIn, right, or made some posts recently, right? Like, or some new research that I know would be of interest to them because they're, in procurement, right? The head of procurement. So there's some cool procurement research by Gartner or whatever. So finding like some really cool insight or nugget that's valuable to them, and then keeping it personal to your point as well. But yeah, just sharing a little something. Hey, how's it going? I was thinking about you, right? And here's a link to whatever, or attached is this or that.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think the one thing that you have to be careful of with that approach is there are a lot of people who do that because they're about to pitch you. And so you want to make sure that you're keeping it in that personal, like peer-to-peer kind of conversation. And I totally agree with what Jesse's saying. Great to bring some of that in. Hey, I just saw that brilliant post you had on LinkedIn, reminded me that we haven't spoken in a long time. Holy crap, can we catch up? Whatever. And it kind of ties into what Alana just asked, which is, are you recommending calling without a time set up for the conversation? Yes. Now, I know this is going to be controversial because people are busy, people aren't used to this, but I recommend sort of taking that switch and default to I want to have conversations versus I want to do things other than conversations. So pick up the phone, call people. You're going to get a lot of voicemails. People are busy. People are going to say, oh, glad you called, but can we talk later? Great. Send them a link to your calendar, whatever. Right? If they're in the wrong time zone, don't call them in the middle of the night, that kind of thing. But there's nothing wrong with picking up the phone and calling people. And if they don't answer, that's when you might say, here's my email, was just thinking about you, saw your post on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. Here's a link to my calendar. Would love to catch up. But don't wait. Did I miss any other questions in the chat? I'm trying to scroll through here.
Not that I noticed.
Okay.
If we
Oh,
did
can you-
overlook a question in the chat, raise your hand and we'll answer it live.
Terry said, can you expand on feedback on positioning on pricing? Is that when we're talking to our network, Terry?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I have this little snippet in the tool. It's like the favorite client interview sheet, but it's things like, what were you struggling with when we connected? What did you try to do to solve it before? Why didn't that work? What was different about what we did? What was the result afterwards, et cetera? And then think about some of the language they use. Like, I was struggling with, they might call it strategy, or they might call it something else. And you're like, oh, in my head, I was labeling the strategy, but for them, it's BPI or something. Like, just the terminology that they use is going to be super important. And then you could say, depending on where you are with your positioning, if you're like confused and whatever, you might say, thank you, let me digest that. If you've got something that you want to kind of try out with somebody, you might say, well, where I'm at right now is I'm trying to position myself as blah, 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 blah. Does that make sense to you? What do you think about that? Tell me honestly. And that's where you get the great feedback. And then I think the other thing that's useful is, if, regardless of whether you have those favorite clients, if you've got peers, right? Another great use of the M.E.G.A network, have a buddy and kind of help each other out with this, because it's so easy for us when we're experts to start talking like we're a doctor talking to other doctors. Or like, if you talk to a doctor, if the doctor is talking to another doctor that's like all in Latin and Greek and you don't even understand what they're talking about, and they're like, oh, I'm fixing your knee. Oh, okay. I didn't know what you meant. And sometimes we have the tendency, at least I do, to do that in our own field. So make sure we're keeping it understandable to somebody who is in the field, but maybe isn't a doctor. And Liz was talking about sending out notes. We'll include a link to another webinar with Stacy Brown Randall. Huge fan of Stacy Brown Randall. Liz and Stacy have both been on my podcast. And I think everything that we talked about here is going to dovetail really well with what Stacy's going to talk about, generating referrals.
100%. Bill has a question about if you're aware of, or do you have thoughts on, Sally Hoghead's fascination advantage? Very similar philosophy.
The short answer is no, I am not aware of that, but it sounds cool, which I assume is the advantage of the whole notion of the fascination advantage, is that you intrigue people and they want to learn more.
Or you're fascinated at them. Maybe Bill would be willing to tell us what it's about.
Yeah, quickly. I just signed up for it. I did it like 5 years ago, and I just scratched the surface. And now I feel more prepared to actually know and be, and then express my unique self. And the key is understand yourself, understand who you are and what you bring to the table and what fascinates people, kind of hooks them, and then just be that, and you'll get the right people. The right people will find their way. So I think it really, first of all, thank you for this. Totally reinforces exactly what I need to hear, including the questions. And just wanted to raise that because I think it's a like-minded person.
Cool, I'll check it out.
Me too.
Appreciate that.
Okay. Any other questions? I can stop the recording, and then maybe people will have more questions when they're not being recorded.
I'll jump in, Liz. Reuben, thanks so much. This was great. I had put sort of a comment in the chat around if you've talked to someone, they said, great, I want more information. You've sent them more information. You've followed up with them a couple times. You don't hear anything. What I heard from you was, this is the time to say, I imagine this isn't a fit for you, so I wish you well. Or, I mean, that was the part where I started to feel awkward, because these are people who actually know really well. So it's not like everyone I've been talking to is potential or people who've been in my network. So I'm just curious, any other thoughts on, because it was like that awkward of like, I don't want to be selling somebody who I know and we're friends and, anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And a lot of it, like, to me, I think that the main thing is, what is the relationship? the person-to-person relationship. That is the primary thing. And if you do that
Yep.
well, then good business will follow. So if this is a friend who's like, this person is crazy busy, her mom's in the hospital, whatever, right? Like, I'm not expecting to hear from them, right? Leave a voicemail thinking about your mom. Look forward to catching up when you have the chance, right? Whatever it might be, that centers the relationship, not the business. Now, the other thing I think that's important is when somebody asks for more information, what are they really asking for? And so a lot of times people ask for information because it's a way to blow you off without seeming impolite,
Oh,
which
interesting.
actually causes much
Okay.
more stress than just saying, hey, this isn't a fit for me right now, right? It's like the person who
Right.
leads you on instead of just saying, I don't want to date you.
Yep.
So when someone asks for information, one of the things we want to understand is what's the purpose of that ask?
Yeah. In
And
this case, it was, I've told about what it was, and they said, oh, would you like authentic interest, like this, I might be interested in this kind of thing. So it wasn't I hear you. It didn't land for me like a blow off, but what's there for me now is sort of, what's the best way to say, I don't care about the selling part. I hope you're well. Like that's the part I'm trying to figure out how to say.
So let's rewind a little bit to that situation of where they say, hey, I think I might be interested in this. Can you send me some info? Right? Like, I'm not saying that, and I'm not trying to say it's bad for someone to do this. Like, we've all sort of been in that situation where we're like, oh, that does sound intriguing, but I'm not ready to do it right now. I'm going to put it in my file.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, man, as soon as I clear the decks next week, the first thing I'm going to pull out is that thing Kim sent me. And sometimes it's like, not good that I don't like him, but it's just buried somewhere. So when someone asks for that, we want to say, oh, okay, well, tell me what's going on. Like, I don't want to presume that you're interested in my services or need to start right away, but like, what are you looking for to get out of this information?
Mhm.
And sometimes people are like, oh, I want to review it with my boss at the next quarterly planning session in December. Right. So it's like, there's no point in me thinking that anything's going to happen before December. Like, that's when they're going to start thinking about it. And so again, like, it's almost like more like we're actually emphasizing the friend to friend part versus the business part. Like, if this was a friend asking me for this, I wouldn't just like email them some attachments. I would delve in and try to figure out what they were really looking for so that I could help them as best as I could.
Right.
And then I would
so,
also
so
know
if I already screwed that up and sent some attachments, these are the way I'm just trying to figure out how to close these out in like the most sort of gracious way, because I don't want to, I feel like I've left it hanging, and that also doesn't, like, I had one person come back and say, this isn't a fit for me now. And I was like, great, thanks so much for letting me, like, I personally would rather have somebody just give me the no, but
totally.
But what's the, like, I don't want to leave this hanging of like, I sent you something you didn't follow up. Now you made me feel bad that you're not like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And so if you imagine you run into this person at the grocery store, what would the conversation be like?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
hey, Reuben, glad we ran into each other.
Right.
I sent you that stuff. I guess it wasn't a fit for you at the time. What's been going on?
Yep.
And then, the reason I was dwelling so much on the sending the attachments or whatever is not to make you feel bad, because we've all been there. But I think, like, the thing that really helped me was to stop thinking of it like a salesperson and start thinking more of it like, if I was a friend, how would I act in this situation? And I would actually be a lot more nosy, right? I would ask more questions, not because I want to pry, but because I want to genuinely help. And that avoids a lot of those weird miscommunications where I think I've got an interested client and they, maybe they send it to Sarah in accounting, who has a stack of these things and, periodically goes through them and calls people, but it's not really urgent, right? Who knows? And there's nothing wrong with that as long as everyone's on the same page.
Yep. No, that's helpful. That's helpful. Okay. Thanks so much. Have a good day, everybody. It was a great session.
Thanks.
Everybody. We'll get the notes out probably by end of day tomorrow, and a link to the recording in case you joined late, or those that have to drop off early. And I've included lots of notes with links to other things to include in that follow-up email. So look for that by end of day tomorrow. And with that, we're going to sign off. Thanks again, Reuben. As always, you knocked it out of the park.
Absolutely.
My pleasure, Liz. Thanks for having me.